Hello, I'm Emily Rhodes, and this is My Ántonia by Willa Cather, which is the February pick for Emily's Walking Book Club. I'm here in Alfie's kind of bed, so you get to see him, I get a little snuggle with him. He's become a complete naughty little thief, loves stealing the children's toys, but I feel like maybe he should be allowed to chew the little dog. Anyway, don't tell the children. And he's much more interested in them than in any of his own toys, of course. Life lesson there, I feel, from having a dog. You get to learn so much. You know, number one, someone else's toys are always nicer than your own. So, My Ántonia, we are discussing this month. I know most of you won't have finished it yet. Some of you maybe have just picked it up. Maybe you're undecided as to whether you're going to read it or not. So along with my introduction that I sent out last week by email, I thought I would just talk to you a little bit about the book and sort of help you through it. Not that you need any help. So for a start, maybe I should begin with by My Ántonia. When I was first told about this book, the person who told me about it, I thought she'd been really stupid because she kept saying Ántonia as Ántonia. She's like, you know, the Willa Cather book, My Ántonia. And I was like, Ántonia. But, you know, of course she was right. And Willa Cather makes that point really clearly. Somewhere in here there's little asterisks explaining that it's pronounced with the accent. Oh yeah, like right at the beginning. The Bohemian name Ántonia is strongly accented on the first syllable, like the English name Anthony. So immediately, even in the title, in the pronunciation of the title, even in this little accent that is there, we're taken into a slightly strange place. You know, this is an this is an American book. And yet the name is not an American name, it's a Bohemian name. And that very much places us in this kind of adventurous time where people were settling in Nebraska and, you know, the kind of Great Plains, the Corn Belt, to sort of tame it and farm it. And people were coming there from all over the world. And I'm just going to say this like straight away, so you know, I am not an expert on this period of history or on American history generally, or even really on American fiction. So perhaps my response is quite naive, but I found it really exciting and really hopeful and kind of extraordinary that America, that, you know, when I think of America today, I think of you know, quite a complex picture. Certainly Donald Trump is in there, but I think of it as very much having an identity of you know, Americans being American. But the characters in this book, although they are in America, are very much becoming American or not becoming American. But there's very much this feeling of the new country of America and the old country. Be that Bohemia, or the Czech Republic now, where Ántonia and her family, the Schmerders, are from, or Austria, where Otto Fuchs is from. He's sort of helps Jim Burden's family. There's the Norwegian settlement where all the Norwegians are, and more nationalities all kind of coming together. There's also Peter and Pavel, the Russians. So it just feels like a completely different place to me, different to anything I'd really expected or experienced. You know, that this very American landscape, and the land is written about so beautifully with the kind of red grasses and this feeling of vastness of it. This huge land and this extraordinary time where people from all over Europe really were coming to settle on it and create homes. And with that, there comes a feeling of how incredibly hard it is and how at the mercy you are of the seasons. The first winter, which is written about here, is so brutal. And well, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but you know, there is a death in part because of it. And you feel, I mean, the Shimurda family in particular, Ántonia's family, they've only just arrived, and they, due to various circumstances, are very poor in America. And they have very little to eat. I mean, basically all they have is this quite extraordinary bag of dried mushrooms that they sort of brought with them. But they have so little, and they are literally burying into the earth to stay warm. There's a brilliant description of Ántonia's bed. It's described as like a foxhole in the earth with some hay and quilts in it, and she says she loves it to kind of stay warm. But you feel like it's what's the word? I suppose you're really going back to some kind of sort of experience of being human and surviving against the elements in this situation, which is really fascinating to read about. This sort of first generation. I think it makes an interesting contrast to our January book of The Ginger Tree, which was about, you know, living in a new place, completely different circumstances. And, you know, our discussion thread last month was very much about living abroad. And, you know, this just gives a completely different take on it, the experience of migration and settling. But I think in this writing of the sort of state of survival and something very kind of pure about our humanity, I think that's something that also comes up quite a lot in this book, and is perhaps what's so special about it. So the book itself is split into 5 different parts. Each part gets slightly shorter as you go, and so the longest part is book 1, the Shimurdas, and it's told from the point of view of Jim Burden, who I think he's 10 when he's at this point in the book he is 10, but he's obviously telling the story from being older, and it's when he first meets Ántonia and her family. And there's something about this childish appreciation of nature, you know, in its glory as well as its harshness, and of friendship, and of the kind of simple things of capturing a grasshopper or lying in the sun, that feels very profound. It feels quite disarmingly simple. And I think there are other moments like that in the book which tunnel down to something that strikes a chord with one. So I'll just read out this particular bit I'm thinking of. It's very near the beginning. So Jim Burden's gone to stay with his grandparents, and the grandmother takes him out to show him the garden. And this is what's written. I sat down in the middle of the garden where snakes could scarcely approach unseen. Yeah, so this is the other side of nature. It's terrifying animals around, the sort of the snakes, and there are the prairie dogs, and there's a story about wolves in it as well. Anyway, where snakes could scarcely approach unseen, and leaned my back against a warm yellow pumpkin. There were some ground cherry bushes growing along the furrows full of fruit. I turned back the papery triangular sheaths that protected the berries and ate a few. All about me, giant grasshoppers, twice as big as any I had ever seen, were doing acrobatic feats among the dried vines. The gophers scurried up and down the ploughed ground. There in the sheltered draw bottom, the wind did not blow very hard, but I could hear it singing its humming tune up on the level, and I could see the tall grasses wave. The earth was warm under me, and warm as I crumbled it through my fingers. Queer little red bugs came out and moved in slow squadrons around me. Their backs were polished vermilion with black spots. I kept as still as I could. Nothing happened. I did not expect anything to happen. I was something that lay under the sun and felt it like the pumpkins. And I did not want to be anything more. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we feel like that when we die and become a part of something entire, whether it is sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. When it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. That quotation is actually on Willa Cather's graveyard, not the whole gravestone, sorry, not the whole thing, but the bit about that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. You know, she just kind of gets such a, there's something so profound there, and it's written so simply, and it's, you know, you're sort of there lying in the grass, feeling the sun, feeling the sort of warm earth crumble in his fingers. And I think many of us have experienced that, or can remember that sort of feeling of childhood, and tunneling through that into something so profound as, you know, this is happiness, is kind of dissolving into what's around us. It's extraordinary. It's quite disarming the way she just kind of gets into this big idea. So I've talked a little bit about Ántonia and you know, her family coming from Bohemia, and the broader context of all these families and people coming from the old world to the new. And so there's this kind of tension through the book of the old and the new. Hopefully from even that tiny little bit, you got a feeling of you know, the pumpkin, that and you know, generally I suppose I'm thinking pumpkin pie, but there's sort of amazing food descriptions in this book, and I'm left like quite intrigued as to taffy and all the corn, of course, and the popcorn. So yeah, you get a real sense of place and culture through that as well. And the bread, there's this brilliant moment where they can't believe the Shimerdas bake their bread, and they leave a little bit in the tin to kind of ferment and start the next bit off, and how I think it's described as ashy and sort of sour. Of course now it'd be this delicious, really expensive sourdough you'd pick up in you know, some trendy bakery, but they're a bit sniffy about it. But I think the other thing I just wanted to mention at the beginning is the other part of the title, which is the my. You can see my Ántonia. Whose Ántonia is it? Is it Jim Burden's, and is his version of her different to anyone else's? There's a moment in the book where her father says, my Ántonia, and you get this feeling of her, you know, maybe belonging to other people in some way, and the problems that pulls up. And in general, it's a kind of slightly bizarre setup, this story being so much about Ántonia, but being from Jim's perspective, you know, not Willa Cather's perspective, but Jim's perspective. It's almost, maybe this is another naive comparison, as I say, I'm not an expert in this, but it's almost a little bit like The Great Gatsby, how you've got, is it Nick Carraway, and his perspective on Gatsby. It's, you know, how much of it is about Ántonia and how much of it is about Jim Burden, and where do those cross over, and what tension is there? And, you know, there's so much to talk about. You know, really, I've just scratched the surface from the very beginning of this book. And I'd love to know your thoughts on it. I can't wait to hear what you think. I feel like it's a very nice one to read. It's sort of simple, it's transporting, there's so much in it. There's something very pure about it. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you.